Trump declares global war. Liberation Day or an economic catastrophe? The day that Trump called Liberation Day has turned into a full-blown disaster. Instead of bringing glory to America, he declared war on the world, especially Canada. Will this decision lead to victory or just plunge the economy into further chaos? Trump's delusional morning, liberation. Through tariffs, on a morning that was supposed to be a glorious Liberation Day, as Trump himself called it, it turned into a complete disaster. Trump woke up, stormed into social media, attacked his allies, threatened global tariffs, and declared war on the world. This time, the target is Canada, a country he once called a close friend. What should have been a historic day is now a moment where everyone has turned their back on him. From "Make America Great" to "Make everyone suffer." Trump started his day by relentlessly posting Liberation Day across social media. He shared a video of a MAGA supporter saying, "This is the greatest salvation day for America." However, the solution Trump proposed was a global tariff plan, with no clear reason, no detailed plan, just a simple assertion that every country should be taxed. This not only strained relations with other countries, but also created instability within the U.S. itself. Trump continued to attack Canada, accusing the country of being a drug den killing Americans, without offering any clear evidence. These baseless accusations not only damaged relations between the U.S. and Canada, but also caused Trump to lose the trust of many allies within his own party. Canada and allies outraged, America is isolated. Canada didn't sit idly by when attacked. The country responded strongly, starting to boycott American goods, rejecting U.S. tourism, and openly criticizing Trump as the one who started the trade war. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney gained increased support, and figures like Doug Ford, a former Trump ally, declared, "We will maximize the pain for America. Sorry for the American people, but it's Trump's fault. Once best friends forever, now Canada has blocked and reported Trump for his toxic remarks. Even allies within the Republican Party no longer support Trump. Senators like Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Rand Paul have spoken out against his tariff plans, arguing they will only push the country into crisis. So while Trump is threatening other nations, he's inadvertently isolating himself, using trade war to distract from economic crisis. While the economy is struggling, inflation is rising, gas prices are soaring, and an economic recession is looming. Trump chose a new direction: global tariffs. This move could trigger a trade war not only with Canada, but also with all of America's trade partners. Yet, while the economy needs stability, Trump chose to escalate international tensions. Trump claims, "Make America Great Again," but his actions are actually make recession real fast. Instead of addressing domestic issues, he's leading the country into an unnecessary war. With this move, Trump is not just creating a trade war, but also distracting attention from more pressing issues, such as gas prices, inflation, and the looming recession. These decisions could make America's economic situation even worse, rather than addressing the real problems. Don't look away if you don't want to miss the next developments in this trade war.
When Trump orders tariffs to save America, Canada stays silent, shuts down factories, and presents a retaliatory bill, a slap in the face to the president. Trump strikes. 3,600 Canadian workers jobless after a single afternoon. Trump decided to impose tariffs on the Canadian auto industry. And just like that, the Windsor Car Assembly Plant, one of the largest manufacturing facilities in Canada, was forced to shut down for at least 2 weeks. The result? 3,600 workers suddenly lost their jobs overnight without understanding why. They woke up with the same hope as any other day, but now they face uncertainty about their future. This is the price paid when a decision from the White House, even if indirectly related, can change the lives of thousands of hardworking employees. Trump's tariffs, hurting others, hurting himself, hurting the neighbors. Trump believed that building a tariff wall would protect the U.S. economy, but little did he know. The economic winds were blowing in the opposite direction. Commodity prices skyrocketed, inflation soared, and jobs were steadily disappearing. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy teeters on the edge of recession. A poorly thought-out trade policy is not only harming the U.S., but is also damaging both countries, including its neighbors. Canada doesn't cry, they go all in. Prime Minister Mark Carney made it clear, they will impose 25% tariffs on all U.S. imported cars that do not comply with the USMCA agreement. However, Canada knows exactly what they're doing. They aren't targeting car parts, because doing so would affect the entire production system. And they aren't targeting Mexico's cars, because Mexico has complied with the agreement. But Canada isn't stopping there. They will impose 25% tariffs on U.S. goods worth $30 billion, effective from March 4th, 2025. And let's not forget, steel and aluminum products worth $12.6 billion, along with other products, will face severe tariffs. So what about the U.S.? Do they think these tariffs will help the economy? Certainly not. These products will only become more expensive and directly impact the economies of both countries. Why doesn't Canada target car parts?
Our tariffs, though, unlike the U.S. tariffs, will not affect auto parts because we know the benefits of our integrated production system.
And imposing tariffs on parts would cause the entire production line to collapse. So, Canada decided not to target car parts, but to impose tariffs only on cars that do not comply with the agreement. We don't retaliate recklessly, but don't mistake us for weak. Unexpected consequences, but also very predictable. So what's happening now? Canadian citizens have started to boycott U.S. goods, cancel their trips to the U.S., and even boo the U.S. national anthem at sports events. We are witnessing a strange phenomenon. When the U.S. national anthem plays, Canadians don't stand at attention. They stand up and boo. And what about Trump? He imposed tariffs on fertilizers and energy imports from Canada, things that American farmers need to sustain their crops. Another unbelievable decision from the White House. Message from Canada: respect doesn't mean we'll endure being hit. Canada has spoken, we respect the American people, but we also have brains, and we won't stay silent when tariffs are slammed into our heads just because someone wakes up thinking they're a trade genius. They're not on strike due to a lack of work, but because Trump's policies have caused economic trouble for both countries. The clear message from Canada: we're not easy to bully, don't try it. Where will this trade war take the U.S. and Canada, and who will truly bear the brunt of the damage in this battle? When a former U.S. president has a meltdown at 2 a.m., posting like a heartbroken teenager just to threaten the world, you know something serious is wrong with America. 2 a.m., a president, or just an ex? In the middle of the night, while most of America was still asleep, Donald Trump's social media lit up like a teenage breakup. More than 10 posts in just 1 hour, and right in the middle of it, a bombshell. If the EU and Canada team up, I'll slap them with killer tariffs. Not a formal speech, not an official statement, just a midnight threat, typed out like someone just broke up with the country. This led many to ask, is this a strategic move, or the sign of a man losing control? Is it a last-ditch attempt to distract the public, while the ground beneath him quietly begins to shift? And if that's true, then America's real problem may be bigger than tariffs. Less than 24 hours later, the backlash begins. It didn't take long. Within 24 hours of Trump's late-night posts, America's oldest allies began pushing back. Hard. Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, a man once seen as one of Trump's biggest fans, suddenly flipped. We'll make sure the U.S. feels the pain. I'm sorry for the American people, but this is on Trump. Then came France, then the UK, then the entire European Union, all backing a new trade alliance with Canada. Without the United States, they were once best friends forever. Now it's block, unplug, and remove from trusted partners list. One EU trade advisor even joked, Trump used to host the party. Now he's locked outside the living room. In global politics, there's no room for 2 a.m. tantrums. One tweet in the wrong tone, and you risk losing alliances that took decades to build. The American wallet is screaming, while Trump's allies, Everyday Americans are staring down a spending crisis. A survey from the University of Michigan shows consumer confidence has hit a 15-year low. Rent is rising. Wages can't keep up with inflation. And basic living costs are crushing family budgets. Some experts warn, those 2 a.m. tweets aren't just impulsive. They're a distraction tactic. When the economy's in chaos, picking a fight overseas becomes the easiest way to divert attention. A Bloomberg analyst put it best. Americans don't care who yells the loudest. They care who makes life a little easier. He says, make America great again. But all we see is make recession real fast. From America first to America alone, Trump once said, America first. But now, it's starting to look more like America alone. Major US companies, Tesla, Apple, GM, they're quietly shifting production lines to Canada and the EU, all to avoid the risks of sudden US policy swings. Within 48 hours of Trump's latest tariff threats, stock prices for major manufacturers plunged. Investors got the message. Political chaos is not a business model. You can't lead the world if the world no longer wants to follow, because no one wants to build their future in a market where tomorrow could be undone by a late-night emotional post. True leadership doesn't shout. It earns trust. Not everyone wants to stay at the party. In a world full of uncertainty, what countries and businesses need most is stability and trust. But if a nation keeps changing its message, threatening partners, and shaking confidence in the market, then no matter how grand the party may be, guests will start leaving. Allies need consistency. Investors need to calculate risk. And the American people? They need answers for tomorrow, not midnight promises made in the dark. If someone wakes up at 2 a.m. just to threaten the world, then we have to ask, are they really in control of the situation? Or is the situation controlling them? Donald Trump, in a bold move, shared an article from New York Post with a headline straight out of a science fiction novel. Western Canadians excited to become the 51st state of the U.S. The only problem? The article interviewed only 3 people. Yes, 3. Among them was Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, who had previously been suspected of ties to Trump in a scandal involving election interference. But it didn't stop there. Trump fanned the flames further.
We don't need energy from Canada. We don't need lumber from Canada. We don't need anything from Canada.
In other words, we don't need anything from them, but we still want to annex them as the new state. Experts described this comment as shooting yourself in the foot. It not only angered the neighbor, but also choked the U.S. import industry, already struggling due to rising raw material prices.
If you had mentioned this to me like 6 months ago, I'd have probably told you were crazy.
Less than 48 hours after that controversial statement, Canada immediately shifted into elbows-up retaliation mode. According to The Guardian, the number of flight bookings from Canada to the U.S. plummeted by 70%. A large number of Canadian consumers swiftly stopped purchasing U.S. goods at major retail chains. Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, now feels eerily quiet. One influencer in Vegas compared it. The atmosphere is like during the pandemic, just missing the face masks. But it didn't stop at boycotting. Canada launched the Choose Canada campaign nationwide, and even in America. Billboards popped up everywhere with a clear message. Tariffs equals taxes dash. Trump's taxes you pay. A message that needs no translation, nor any further explanation. In Georgetown, Ontario, during a heated yet intimate talk, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't shy away or speak ambiguously. He made a clear statement.
We also have to stand up directly to a man named Donald Trump. Yeah. A man who, don't blame you. No, a man who wants to break us so America can own us. That is the strategy. No, and that is never, ever going to happen.
And he unveiled a 3-step plan, concise.
Strategy, what we're doing in face of these pressures. We're doing 3 things. We're going to fight. We are going to protect, and we are going to build.
Build, strengthen. Launch a plan to build 500,000 houses per year, transforming the 13 provincial economies into a unified, strong federal bloc. But that's not all. Carney even threw a slight jab at political opponent Pierre Poilievre, who had previously proposed cutting welfare programs like dental care, pharmaceuticals, and child benefits. A checkmate both domestically and internationally.
If his tariffs go into effect, you could see eggs increase by about $1.75 a carton. They're already expensive. That's an awful big increase. $2.75 a pound for salmon. Bread, 87 cents a soap, $1.50 a bar. Flour, $1.37 a pound. Sugar, $1 a pound. Olive oil, $3.25 a bottle. Pork roast increasing $2.12 a pound. Sausages, $1.62 a pound. Vinegar, $1.50 a bottle. Salt and pepper, $1. Tea, $1.
So, who was affected the most? Low-income families, those who go to the supermarket weekly, unable to buy in bulk and stock up. Large families, where each small price increase adds up to an extra $1,800 to $3,600 per year in expenses. Inflation spreads. Raw material prices rise. Production costs increase. Bread, pizza, soda also rise. Decreased purchasing power, increased debt. With credit card interest rates surpassing 20%, many households will continue to rotate credit cards to survive the week. What's concerning isn't just Canada. Europe, Japan, South Korea, and China, who typically don't play nice together, are now drawing closer to distance themselves from the US. Canada reacts strongly and retaliates fiercely as Trump imposes a 25% tariff on cars. Flight bookings between the US and Canada drop by 70% as citizens boycott travel to the US. Trump sparks trade war. When Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on cars imported from all countries, including Canada, is he sparking a new trade war, or is this just a political move? This decision not only affects the automotive industry, but also creates significant tension between the two neighboring countries. So why is Canada reacting so strongly? Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't hesitate to call it a direct attack on Canadian workers. Is this the beginning of a bigger conflict? Will Canada back down under this pressure, or will they continue to stand firm? Canada reacts strongly, boycotting travel and trade. With Trump's decision, Canada didn't sit idly by. The latest data shows that flight bookings between the US and Canada have dropped by up to 70%. Why are Canadians choosing to boycott travel to the US? How are they reacting to this decision? The Buy Canadian Only movement is spreading fast. At supermarkets like Costco, Canadians are sharing images of only purchasing domestic products. This action not only shows their spirit of unity, but also sends a strong message. We will not be oppressed. Can a boycott movement truly impact the US economy? Will we see a significant shift in trade relations between these two countries? Domestic travel booms, tours shift direction. One of the most notable reactions is the domestic travel boom in Canada. Cross-country tours are selling out, while trips to the US are being canceled in large numbers. But what is driving Canadians to turn back to their own country instead of traveling to the US? Canadians are choosing to explore their own country instead of going to the US. This is not just a protest against US policies, but also a declaration of the nation's sovereignty. Will this shift last long-term, or is it just a temporary change? Are Canadians realizing that they can find amazing experiences right within their own country? And could this become a driving force for growing tourism and a stronger domestic economy in the future? Protests in Canada. Strong unity. Unlike typical boycotts, Canadian citizens have shown strong unity through protests. Notably, in Toronto, a protest took place in front of the US consulate with the slogan "Elbows Up," a symbol of resilience and solidarity. MP Charlie Angus spoke boldly. We will never be the 51st state of the US. We will not kiss the ring of the dictator Trump. This statement shows the determination of Canadians to protect their nation's sovereignty. Can these protests create enough pressure to change US policies? Can this unity become a key factor for Canada to exert greater influence in international relations? Message from the government and citizens. Prime Minister Mark Carney has strongly affirmed that Canada will protect its workers, protect its businesses, and protect the homeland. The government and Canadian citizens are demonstrating an impressive unity in defending the country's national interests. In addition to the boycotts and domestic protests, this movement has gained attention worldwide. Countries like Australia, France, Scotland, and many others have expressed their support for Canada. This shows that Canada is not just protecting its own interests, but also setting an example for other nations. Will this movement inspire other countries to rise up and defend their national rights? Will we see a global wave of resistance? Will Canada truly change the global trade landscape? Or will this just be a small fight that won't lead to any major change? What will happen to the Canadian people in this trade war? 90% of Canadian tourists canceling U.S. trips. Travel is no longer just about vacation. It's now a political statement. Canadian tourists boycotting U.S. travel. Every year, millions of Canadian tourists cross the border into the U.S. from Florida to New York, spending billions of dollars on travel services. However, this year, things have changed dramatically. According to the Old Orchard Beach Tourism Council, Canada accounts for 40% of the tourists in the area, but this year, that number has sharply dropped. Hotel owners like Sterling Morse in Maine report that over 90% of their Canadian customers have canceled their trips, causing severe losses for local businesses. These numbers reflect a major disruption in the tourism industry, especially since Canadian tourists have been a stable source of income for many regions. This is not only impacting the economy, but also weakening the economic relationship between the two neighboring countries. So, why is this happening? Trade tensions and hostile rhetoric between politicians have led to this shift. This is not just about a tourism boycott, but a clear expression of national pride. For many Canadians, traveling to the U.S. is not just for fun. It's a recognition of a peaceful and respectful relationship. The tensions in international relations have eroded these values, leading to the decision not to travel to the U.S. as a way of protesting the administration's policies. This is also a signal that countries will no longer tolerate decisions that can harm mutual respect. Wide-ranging economic impact. According to the Maine Tourism Council report, Canadian tourists contribute about $1.2 billion annually to the local economy. Each Canadian tourist spends not only at resorts, but also in shops, restaurants, and attractions. This boycott could force many businesses to close or scale down operations during the tourist season. This issue isn't just affecting the tourism industry. Other industries like transportation, lodging services, and retail stores are also being hit hard. Businesses may need to find replacement customers or accept declining profits while costs remain unchanged. In the midst of a struggling economy, the absence of Canadian tourists not only reduces revenue, but also puts small businesses at risk of closure, deepening the economic crisis in the region. This isn't just tourism, it's a political statement. So, is tourism still just tourism? It's time we realize that tourism can now be a powerful tool for political statements. When people choose to boycott a country, not because they dislike the tourist attractions, but because of that country's policies and statements, it becomes a lesson in national pride. With 40% of the tourists at Old Orchard Beach being Canadian, this change could have far-reaching impacts. This isn't just a loss in revenue, but a message of dissatisfaction with the U.S. national policies. This tourism policy has now become a tool to express political views. It reflects not only the resistance from the Canadian people, but could spark similar movements from other countries, where tourism becomes a means to show discontent with U.S. international policies. This event is not only a blow to the U.S. economy, but also a lesson in respect within international relations. When a country decides to stop cooperating on tourism and consumption, it's not just about dissatisfaction, but a form of resistance to actions that could harm their values and sovereignty. It also shows that tourism isn't just about moving from one country to another, but now it's a part of soft power strategy. The Canadians are teaching the U.S. an important lesson in self-respect and respect. How will international relations change after this event? Will we see other countries adopt a similar strategy, using tourism as a tool to express dissatisfaction with the policies of other nations? To find out what happens next, stay with us and watch the rest of the video. In just one day, more than 1,300 protests will erupt across all 50 states. What could drive so many Americans to the streets, all at once? And more importantly, why are even his former supporters starting to have doubts? This Saturday could mark a day unlike any other in modern American history. Over 1,300 protests are set to take place across the country, from the biggest cities to the quietest corners of Wyoming and Montana. It will be the first time since Trump took office that Americans rise up together on a scale this massive. And this time, it's not being organized by any political party or major movement.
Similar rallies in every capital of every state and Washington, D.C., because we've reached a point of urgency that we need a big optical display, and people are freaked out.
This is different. This is a grassroots wave of frustration, fueled by economic policies that are hurting people's everyday lives. The anger is real, and it's spreading fast. At the heart of this massive backlash is Trump's latest global tariff policy. Under the banner of protecting American industry, the government has dramatically raised import taxes on goods from China, Canada, the EU, and Mexico. But instead of boosting U.S. production, it's everyday Americans who are paying the price. Living costs are soaring, businesses are struggling to survive, and thousands are losing their jobs. Take this as a clear example. The price of a dozen eggs has nearly doubled in just a few months. Key sectors like construction, food, and technology have been hit hard by rising input costs. Wages haven't budged, but everything else has gotten more expensive. To many, it feels like they're the ones suffering, while politicians play power games with the economy. The frustration has hit a breaking point. What makes this protest wave truly different is where it's happening. It's not just liberal states like New York or California. This time, it's Montana, Alaska, even deep red states, all hosting dozens of events. The frustration has crossed party lines. Even longtime supporters are starting to ask, are these policies really working for us? When electricity bills skyrocket, when factories shut down, when the cost of living becomes unbearable, that once powerful slogan, America First, starts to feel empty. There's no central organization behind this, no massive campaign funding, no marching orders from political leaders. These are just ordinary Americans, a teacher, a mother, a factory worker, a small business owner. Each of them came for their own reasons, but they all share one powerful feeling. Their basic rights are under threat. And if they don't act now, things will only get worse. One phrase has become the symbol of this movement: hands off. Hands off public education. Hands off our healthcare system. Hands off workers' rights. Hands off the LGBTQ community. And most of all, hands off our democracy. No one told them to protest. The moment itself left them no choice. It's not just happening at home. Trump's tariff policies are triggering strong reactions from America's international partners. The European Union has warned that unilateral tax hikes from the US could break the global supply chain. Canada has condemned the move as lacking cooperation, and Mexico has vowed to retaliate if the US refuses to adjust course. And these aren't just diplomatic statements. They're real threats, with real consequences. If tensions keep rising, America could face capital flight, supply chain disruptions, and slowing growth. At home, Americans are already struggling under rising prices. But now, pressure from abroad is making everything feel even more unstable. No one can say for certain if these protests will bring immediate change. But one thing is clear: the American people are speaking louder than ever. They no longer place blind faith in what the government tells them. They want to see real policies that actually serve their lives, not ones that make existing problems even worse. Keep watching, because this is only the beginning. Liberation Day. What did Trump just do to cause the US market to lose $1 trillion? Liberation Day, a name that sounds like a Hollywood blockbuster, but in reality, it's the day the US market goes up in flames under Donald Trump's hands. Why is this happening? Donald Trump announced a minimum 10% tariff on all imported goods into the US, calling it a strategic move to restore trade fairness and end exploitation. For imported cars, the tariff skyrocketed to 25%. Immediately, the financial world was shaken. He called it Liberation Day. But the market immediately went into panic. Dow futures lost over 1,000 points. S&P 500 dropped 3.7%. Nasdaq plunged nearly 5%. CNBC called it the worst shock since COVID. The name liberation was left only on paper. In a less than 10-minute speech at the White House, Trump didn't just highlight the issue of cheating. He threw in confusing examples like plastic eggs at Easter to describe subpar goods. He declared a 10% tariff on all imported goods, stating, "Each country will be taxed based on what they charge us."
China, first row. China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers.
Instead of providing clarity, the speech left investors even more bewildered. While the president spoke of growth charts, the markets saw a dramatic downward plunge.
Costs aren't going down, they're going up. Inflation is going up. As you pointed out, what's happening is that the stock market is collapsing.
Barron's didn't hesitate to call it a move that sabotages the world's economic engine. The real consequences aren't found on the Nasdaq floor, they're in the pockets of the American people. Inflation is creeping up and consumer prices, from food and fuel to electronics, are surging across the board. Meanwhile, retirement funds and investment accounts lost billions in a single trading session. According to initial calculations from the Tax Policy Institute, a middle-class family could face an additional $3,800 per year. Representative Hakeem Jeffries called it a day of full-blown recession, not a liberation day. He pointed out that Trump promised costs would go down, but now everything is headed in the opposite direction. One of the most controversial statements was when Trump declared that America should return to the 18th century tariff system.
You know, the United States in 1870 to 1913, all tariffs, and that was the richest period in the history of the...
But what's often overlooked is the context back then was completely different. The US didn't have a central bank, no heavy industry, no global trade or modern supply chains. The current economy cannot function on a mindset from 200 years ago. Applying outdated models to today's hyper-connected financial world could lead to uncontrollable chain reactions. Trump openly criticized. He pointed out that products like milk, beef, and cheese were facing unfair tariffs, and the US needed to retaliate. But Canada's response was swift and strong. People started a massive boycott of American goods. The hashtag #OsherBoycottUSA trended worldwide, and Canadian businesses canceled orders from US companies. Experts are warning that the $800 billion trade relationship between the US and Canada is now severely fractured. A unilateral move could cost the US one of its closest trade allies. The economic impact isn't just hitting the markets, it's bleeding into politics. In states that were once Trump strongholds like Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, recent elections have shown a clear shift. Iowa saw an unexpected victory for an opposition candidate with a margin of 25 points. Pennsylvania witnessed an unprecedented flip in a district that hadn't seen an opposition representative in over 100 years. And in Wisconsin, the battleground state, the electorate has clearly turned against the tariff policies. This shows that people are sending a message with their votes. Economics is no longer just a theory. It's a reality they feel every day. The final question isn't what happened, it's why. Some experts argue that this is the result of a familiar management style. Push everything into crisis, then restructure from the rubble. Trump has filed for bankruptcy multiple times, and now